This episode is sponsored by SKS Luxury Appliances. If you've spent time around Signature Kitchen Suite, one thing designers notice right away is the technology. The interface feels familiar and intuitive because it's the same engineering that comes from LG, the company that produces the systems used in many of the luxury vehicles people drive today. Clients recognize it instantly and know how to navigate it, but SKS is also investing in designers through their Designer Rewards program and by sponsoring IDC. If you're specifying kitchens for serious cooks, give SKS a look. Learn more at sksappliances.com. SKS, built for people who truly love cooking.
Hi, I'm Lori from To The Trade Frontier Design Community, and I have Karen Laos here. I'm so excited to talk to you, Karen. So thank you so much for coming on our show.
You're welcome. I'm excited for our topic.
Yeah, so I just randomly was scrolling Instagram as I do, and I saw your content. It was probably put into my FYP, and I just was like, this lady is saying the things that I think designers need to hear. But we'll get more into that, but so you know more about what she talks about. But first, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, originally, I think about my childhood because when I was 6 years old, my dad actually took me to a flea market and he gave me a few dollars and he said, go have fun, but never pay full price.
Ooh.
And that was truly the moment that I realized, wait, what? You don't have to just put pay what's on the price tag. So that enabled me to continue I would say, successful career around having the confidence to ask. And so many people do not have that confidence. And he used to always teach me the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You don't have if you don't ask. The answer will always be no if you don't ask. So that was really drilled into me. But it is also important to say the other piece of my story, because I find a lot of women in particular, but people in general, relate to this. I grew up in a very traditional home. So my mom in the household, although she never said this out loud, she submitted to my dad's authority in the household. And I was very confused by that because in the community, she was a powerhouse. She was running all of these clubs and things and getting awards in the media. And I had to navigate, now through lots of growth work over the years, but really trying to figure out, my reconciliation was when I'm offering value to someone, which is usually producing something, then I can ask, then I feel really confident. But when it's, I would say, like a voice, like my actual voice alone doesn't have value in the home or in relationships when it's just me. And not to get too deep around this, but I do think that it is important to acknowledge how our childhood shapes us related to the decisions that we make. And so it was an interesting just journey over the course of the years because at times I would have a challenging time asking when it was something more related to me personally. And so then fast forward all the years later to when I started my business in 2020 after a long corporate career, primarily through communication, helping people speak with confidence through their delivery as well as their message, that I realized, okay, this is one of those things I've got to figure out so that I can continue I can continue the success. But for example, one time I was in a boardroom and I couldn't get the words out.
I've been there. So yeah, it's intimidating, right? I mean, sometimes you're just like, I've been the only woman in a boardroom on numerous occasions where the deck felt stacked against me. I had an attorney there, their corporate attorney. I've had their vice president of sales, their CEO, and they're negotiating with me.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got 7 people with as the opposing party.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. Well, and that's such a good example of the situational times when we might feel more intimidated or there's an archetype of a person and then that triggers us for whatever reason. And in that particular case, I remember thinking, why is it that I am in this boardroom and yet that I can't seem to get the words out? But I'm commanding stages at companies like NASA, Google, all these different big brands. And I continue to learn the more people I talk to, how this is so common of, oh my gosh, I'm 52 years old and yet I feel like a 12-year-old in front of my boss. Somebody told me that once. And There's these situational things that we don't often realize. And so the more that we can.
I think misogyny plays into all of our lives in ways we
Yes.
don't really acknowledge, And
Totally.
it's huge in our field, in design field, because everyone else typically, and not always, but everyone else usually on the project is a man in a designer's world. And she is on this, project site, on a build site with contractors and architects and, tile guy and a painter and, a whole construction team. And she might be one of the only women on that field. So when she comes up and says, oh, I have this idea, or I think we should do it this way, how do you think that's met? It's those kinds of things that force us, I feel like, to be afraid, because it's not always what our opinions aren't always met with someone responding by listening and respecting our opinion. So we know that.
It is so true. And I love that you just said we know that, because that's such a good example of knowing what you're stepping into. And that's so important in any situation, to have a strategy. And that's what's so important to me. And when I was stuck in that moment, there's more to the story, but ultimately I didn't agree with what my boss suggested I present, but I was taught you don't question your boss, so you just figure it out. But then when it came to the actual time, I couldn't get those words out. And I wished in hindsight, that I had said something months prior. And so what I love to help people do is have a strategy around what to say, but then also how to say it, so you're equipped. And before you walk into any scenario, or at least as much as you can, be ready for what might happen in those moments.
Absolutely. I read not long ago Brene Brown's book about strong ground and all those rumble conversations, difficult conversations, and how we navigate them. And of course, she's working on the corporate level, and this is a much smaller, more intimate situation, but it still holds true in how we navigate that conversation that is difficult, so that we are remaining calm and respectful, even if others are not. So
oh my gosh, yes.
so hard.
That
It's
is
such a
so
hard thing.
I know. Well, and it's that balance of warmth and assertiveness, right? That
Yes.
making sure that you come across as friendly, but you're not a pushover. And then not being, you want to be assertive enough that people know, okay, I can't push her around. And yet, not being so strong then that you come across as unlikable completely. So it is so hard to be a woman in business.
It really is. And I think it's not necessarily, while I think there are lots more tools and there are lots more women in the workforce today than there were even in my mom's generation or my grandmother's generation, which even, I am 51, and my grandmother was told when she went to college she could be a teacher or a nurse. That was it. Her father was a judge, and she wanted to be an attorney. And her dad said, I'll pay for school, but you can only be a teacher or a nurse. So she was a teacher, and that was her career. She spent her adult life being an English teacher, and she married my grandfather, who became a president of a college. And, so education was always part of our world. But I just think about the opportunities that women have today, and with the education of being able to learn from people like you, to have those conversations, how much bigger careers we can have, and then modeling that for our own daughters. My daughter's turning 25 next week, and so she's just starting her career, and we have conversations all the time about her career and how I would like it to be different than mine, or better than mine, or learn from my mistakes early on. I remember years where I didn't take a vacation day, and
Yes. Oh my
all of the
goodness.
things you're talking about, and how we navigated because we were afraid, to get in there. So I really love that you're talking about this and teaching women how to have these conversations. You say after college you spent 4 years traveling with people. What did doing that do for your career later on down the road?
The travel and the learning of truly how to understand other people and the perspectives of where other things are coming from, and just the mixed so much of life is expectations. You think, like, for example, I remember one of the first tours that we did was in Italy, and we got to the host family, and we were starving. We had been on the bus for about 9 hours. The host family gives us this amazing pasta dish, and they kept asking us, here more, manja, to have more. Then we had a couple of portions of that, but had no idea that there was an entire other course coming. So we were already super full, and then more food kept coming, and then the grapes and the cheese after the main course. And so little things like that, where it happened all the time in business too, where you think something's going to be this way and then it isn't. So I would say the ability to be resilient and flexible,
Yes.
and the also just being able to pivot on a dime, where you realize, oh, the bus just broke down and we were supposed to be in such and such city tonight. And so that's not happening. Now, what do we do then instead?
Oh, that is crucial. I mean, that's crucial for all of our designers because that happens literally every day to them. They have expectations that they set with clients all the time on material deliveries. And a lot of being an interior designer is there are so many moving parts that are really sort of out of your control. I mean, you can't really ensure that a product comes in on time, is perfect when it comes in. There's shippers involved, the tariffs, the travel costs now, the gas prices and how that's impacting the sale price that you might have quoted 4 months ago and now it's time to buy it and it's totally changed. And those cringy conversations we have to have with everyone involved.
Well, and that does bring up a very good point just about when you talk about the cringy conversations, because when you're traveling with 150 people for a year at a time, and I did it for 4 years, and you're on a bus with, like, you are in community with these people. You can't avoid people. Or, I mean, I suppose you could, but it would be really uncomfortable. And that was also a really powerful learning about leaning into conflict for the point of bridging understanding. And I think about any of, the client work like you're talking about with the people that you serve too, just really being very clear about, okay, what can we do? How can we see this from a positive? And then times where, there's a lot obviously out of the control, like you said, if things don't show up on time or when they said they would. I also think that it goes, there's spades of grace when we're just honest about, hey, this is what happened. I didn't see this coming, or whatever it might look like. And as Simon Sinek, who wrote the book Start With Why, I think that is such a powerful reminder too of just knowing if people understand the why behind something, they're a lot more understanding. But a lot of times we feel like, oh, I have to save face or I have to make myself look better, especially in front of a client. Of course, we all want to look good. But I think at the end of the day, everybody just appreciates, just be honest. Like, there is just so much BS in our culture today that I think most people have a very high BS meter.
My kids, when they were growing up, my husband had this phrase where he said, just fall on your sword. Just fall on your sword immediately. People, they're going to have to own it anyway. So
Yes.
you've done something for which you need to apologize or for which you need to explain what an outcome. Just immediately rip the Band-Aid off. Say it. I think AI, honestly, has changed the game for designers, and that we've been teaching since the AI came out. Even internally, those emails that you get, you read that first sentence and you can tell they're mad. Throw that even into ChatGPT or a Gemini or Claude. I use Claude more now, but throw that in there and then read what comes out. Like, just say, make this nicer.
Yeah.
Read that, but keep all the integrity of the points, please. And then read that. And then your emotional response too, as you're responding to it, can be different too, because people just don't know that. I always joke on this podcast, not really joke, but it's true that there is always some designer who's not going to sleep tonight because they got an email and they're afraid to answer it. And they're just going to be, winding the gears all night long, worried about all the scenarios, catastrophizing, making, worrying about every worst case scenario, because that's kind of built into the world of design. We anticipate every actuality, which is how someone becomes a good designer, because they're thinking like if I'm thinking about how you're going to use your kitchen, and I know you really like to come have a cappuccino in the morning and you like to have, big dinner parties, and, they have to look at every use of that, but you have let's just say you have a small space for that. And they want to maximize every space so that you can navigate your kitchen so effortlessly. And so they might look at, before they've even presented you a design plan, they might have done 15 or 20 in their head of like, no, that can't go there, because then if she opens the door, it's going to knock that drawer when that drawer is open. And that's, we've all been in Airbnbs and places that were not functioning design, and what that feels like when you open the door and then it hits this door, so you can't open that door. And we've all done that. But designers are trying to prevent any of that possible scenario from happening. And so that's just the way they're built. And so when these problematic things that are relationship based, where the client is mad because something didn't show up, they also that thing, that muscle in their brand that is so great to work out those design problems now kicks in to continue, like, how is that problem going to be solved and how can I make them happy? And it just works overtime. It's such a developed path in their brain. So they immediately catastrophize of every possible problem that could happen, up to being sued by the client, or losing the project, or the contractor being mad. Like, all of the things that could happen in a financial conversation with somebody who has a lot more money than you do. Let's face it, the clients to designer, that's the situation that we're dealing with. So it's just fascinating. And I think that having what you're teaching, having those skills to really understand empathy and conversation and how to navigate those difficult conversations well, not only can protect them legally, but also set them up so that this stuff doesn't, that they can sleep at night. They can just enjoy their evening, even though problems happen like that. And I will say, the designers who are in the business for 30 years, they're like, they've already had worst case scenarios happen at some point.
Yeah.
So they're just sort of like, this is just furniture at the end of the day, and it'll get solved and I'll be fine. But that newbie who's, just starting out or is 10 years in business and navigating growth, it's always a challenge. So I think it's fascinating. Did you experience immediately how you were communicating and rebuilding your confidence in that process? Of where did you get to the point where you were like, I want to teach others what I do, because this is so needed?
Yeah, it was in that boardroom moment, because what happened, because my boss shut down the meeting. I just couldn't get the words out. And she pulled me aside after and she said, Karen, you didn't trust your gut. You could have just tabled the meeting. And in that moment, I thought of two things. Number one, what? Like, I could have tabled the meeting? I didn't know that was an option. And then secondly, and probably most importantly, is why do I keep asking for permission? And that was the day that I realized I've got to make a change. So I really went to town figuring out what the root of my problem was. And so I went on my own personal growth journey at that time for, I would say, probably a good couple of years, maybe even 3 years. But then I would say that when I realized, oh my gosh, I was actually in a prison of my own making. Like, every single one of us has agency to choose differently. But then we're all responsible to figure out, well, what is the thing that's holding me back? So for me, I always had confidence. I'm not somebody that's had the traditional imposter syndrome. I've always thought my ideas are great. Like, my dad taught me almost to be overconfident, but again, related to my abilities. But when it came to my voice, my mom's influence would be there of like, who am I to be in this place, or like not want. And when I say that, I mean, my priority was making sure that everybody was comfortable and happy.
Ooh.
So that is the
resonates with me.
Yeah, it sounds like, ooh, yes. I actually am reading the book, The Courage to Be Disliked. And it is such a good one. It is such a good one, because that's my big thing was, and I was taught, like, don't rock the boat. And so my fear was rocking the boat in that particular case. So that's why I bring up, I said earlier, like, sometimes a person might be an archetype of somebody else. And in this case, in that boardroom, my female boss, who was president of the company, years later through therapy, I realized, oh my gosh, she is the archetype of my dad. And so I just felt this like huge intimidation, and particularly in that space, because I also didn't agree. So all of this to say, I would have chosen differently, went to, again, all the work to do my own personal growth work, and then realized it is so empowering to free yourself. And it's possible because communication is a skill that then will build that confidence. So it's the action that you've got to take. Now, I had the years of experience around helping people speak with confidence and stand up on stages and be great speakers, but what I wanted to do, and that's when I finally left a few years later. So in 2019, I made a decision I was going to leave the company specifically to help 10 million women overcome self-doubt and communicate with confidence in 10 years. So I had 10 million in 10 years. We're about 5 million in right now, and it's going to culminate on the Chase Center Stadium in San Francisco in 2030. I just hired the event planner for it, and it's going to be a celebration of reaching the 10 million. But that's really what gets me up every day and the simplicity of just knowing a few phrases to help you, and even just leaning into courage. I have exercises around that. Everything that I talk about is very practical. Okay, here are a couple of phrases you could try and see if it works.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't, try something else. And you might have different audience or different, potential clients or current clients. And so when this happens, try this. So, and so much of this, frankly, has been through my own experience too of experimentation. And one of my favorite examples was when I was negotiating with the HR person where the company wanted me to coach potentially the CFO. And I will tell you, this sentence has never come out of my mouth before. I don't even know where it came from, but it was one of my better moments. And it was one of those phone calls where I was in the loading dock of a building because she happened to call me in that moment and she asked for my rate. So I gave her my rate, and then there was this long pause. And as you know, in negotiation, it's always about, can you pause longer? Can you be the one that use silence to work for you? And I waited quite a while. There was still a pause. And then I just decided to ask one of my favorite phrases, which is, how does that land with you? And I love that also because it gives people permission to either say, oh, wow, like it almost like gives this relief where they feel that they have permission to say what they really think. And then when she said, well, I'll tell you that is significantly higher than the other coaches we've been looking at. And then I said, I recognize that I'm higher than most. Is that a deal breaker? And that's when she said, absolutely not. That is not a deal breaker at all. We want you to meet the CFO. But that was one of those moments where I had never used that line, is that a deal breaker? And I never have said like that. That was also a moment in my own growth to realize, wow, I've never said I recognize I'm higher than most. I'm finally starting to own the value that I bring. And so little things like that. So it's the phraseology, but then it's also the presence in which you say something. How certain are you? Because again, I know I'm preaching to the choir with you, Lori, but it is all about how certain are you in your offer? How certain are you that you are the one to be the person that serves them?
Right.
And I mean, there's so many interior
designers, they are working on particular projects that can take 2 years. I mean, building a home is very long-term process. So when they say yes, let's just say they're in that scenario where they had that conversation with the client, and believe me, almost every client today is saying, I didn't expect it to be that high because the prices have gone nuts. Not our fault, but just tariffs and increases over the last 10 years have been astronomical. Even someone coming back who's recently done a design project 10 years ago is going to see wildly different numbers from every designer across the board. And I think that is so scary to those designers. And so when they're in that situation, I could feel them being in the situation you're talking about and wanting to just lower the price and immediately before they even ask.
Yeah.
And then they're locked in on that project for a very long time. And it also prevents them from working with someone who would have valued them. And, like looking at the opportunity from a perspective of, does it really serve me and my goals and what I want for my business? Is that the right decision to take this project on for my team, if they have people work for them, or if they work in conjunction with other trades, like, is it the best project to work with someone who already is not valuing them at all? And sometimes you're right, it is in our head. We're not even giving them the opportunity to sit with it for a minute because
Right.
it is scary. I mean,
Yes,
we
it
don't
is.
likes to see that number.
I know. Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, you're dealing with huge numbers.
Huge numbers, huge numbers.
And
When you
that,
talk
yeah,
about huge homes, like, it can be pretty crazy what they
yes,
cost. Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, and what comes to mind for me is when we say yes to those things that we don't really want to be doing financial or that they aren't paying off, we get resentful. And then that continues to erode on our own confidence. I think I've experienced that anyway, where I've said yes to something and then thought, oh, why did I do that? And even recently, I set a new minimum for my speaking, and I normally subcontract with a training company. Every once in a while, they'll call me in, and I've recently told them that I have a new minimum, and then they still came back and said, well, would you accept this instead? And that was one of those moments in the past. I would have said, well, okay. And I thought, you know what? This is such a reminder. I'm doing a lot of work on my own money mindset right now. And that was that moment where I said, no, I haven't, like, what would my word be worth then if I'd already told them I have a new minimum and then I come back and negotiate? In that particular case, I had no interest in negotiating, and it was hard to give that money. I mean, frankly, I would have enjoyed the trip and they would have paid for my travel and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's no, I made an agreement with myself. And I do think that that's also really important and a huge thing that I've been learning about my own identity and my value, and then communicating my value. So there's so many components to this that I continue to learn are so complex with the way that we are as human beings.
Question about that too. When
Yeah.
you set that rule for yourself and you're like, this is where I'm going to sit and I'm not going to take anything lower, and you do finally do that, is there a moment where as a result of that new decision, there is kind of a lull because you're not quite practiced at it yet? And so you might feel like saying no immediately turns off that fountain of business that's coming your way,
Mm,
and then you're like, well, I still have to pay my bills here. You know what I mean, at the end of the day. But is there a
yes.
moment, like, do you have to give yourself some time for that to really fully sink into yourself so that you believe it yourself and so that it actually can work for you? And is that part scary? Does that make
Well,
sense?
yep, it does. So I'm going to
Okay.
answer a few different ways. So the first thing that I would say is that it's simply a decision. You're making a decision. This is what I am now charging. Now, it is scary for sure. So I want to acknowledge that too, because believe me, I've been working on this, like really digging in for the past year on what my money story is. Grew up in a very frugal home, the whole scarcity mindset. How do I move past that? And I have been really learning a tremendous amount from my wealth mentor, Susan Glusica. And so much of what she has taught me is the part about this identity, like and then just saying this is a decision I'm making. But here's what I think is fascinating. When you make the decision and you step into that with confidence of this is my new rate, let's say, that what I have seen is then these other opportunities pop up that are better than that. And this coach's her mantra is always better is on its way.
Right.
So when I got the response from this recent engagement, a potential engagement I was mentioning, and they said, we can't make that work, but look forward to next thing. And I said, I understand. And I initially had said, I understand if that does not work for you. But I'll tell you, I felt it was one of those growth moments for me because in the past, I might have thought, oh, I should have just done it. But this is my own growth because I realized, you know what? Better is on his way. So, that was something in the, I don't know, just to speak real numbers here, that was $3,500. And that was for a corporate training where I do no sales. They just call me and do this. But then I turn around and I met a person on a plane within the few days. And now we're talking about a 6-figure contract. So it's so scary. It's like that, that analogy of a trapeze artist where the letting go and that limbo land of where you're between the letting go and then grabbing the next.
That's so hard to even think about, because I think that's the fear right there, is that next bar is not coming our way and we're just going to fall. And that
Yes.
is where I think so many of us just want to grasp and grab
Well, believe me, yeah, and I've done a lot of intentional work on this, and it is so incredibly empowering when you take that stand for yourself. And I do think that a big part of this is trusting yourself, trusting that you will find yourself because you will create the right opportunities for yourself. And the more that I learn about wealth, the more I realize I can create it. It's not like I'm passively waiting for somebody, but it's getting out there. And obviously you have to take action, but then there's such a huge part of this that is also energetic. Do I believe it? And why can't I just decide today, hey, this is what I'm going to charge? And I feel like that a lot of people that come to me will ask me, well, I only have this, and this is especially true for women. I only, this air quotes, I only have, X years of experience compared to somebody else. How could I possibly charge that? And that's when I always come back to, it's a decision. Do you believe that the value that you are offering is worth that? And then if you do, then that's all that matters.
Well, it's also, doing the numbers on, from backwards, like what is the salary you have to pay yourself, and your overhead if you have a team, and then the numbers right there of if you do the math backwards, like this is what we need to be operational and these are the sales we have to hit, then it kind of tells you can't take those jobs because they don't fit in the operational budget. And you can do it from the back end where you're like, okay, these are the salaries and this is the rent and this is the overhead. And, I want to make X and you need to be in there and I have to have a retirement account and I have to have insurance for the business and I have to have the things that I need. You calculate all of that. And even if you're working from home, I don't really care. You work from home, and you're just by yourself. You still have to figure out those numbers. And then it helps what you can take and whether or not that job, because I know designers who've taken, like, they love the house, they love the project, they're an artist, they like the client, they feel sorry for the client, they maybe just went through something. So there's all of these other factors, and they're making that decision from a standpoint of the emotion of that. And like, this feels like an exciting project. And like you just said, I would love to go on that trip. I would love to go see those people. I like them, or I like going there. That's not a business. That's not a financial part of your financial equation in any way, know?
Right.
So making that really about the numbers. Now, interior designers, they frequently say consumers don't even understand what they do, which is really true. We polled them, 95% said that they don't feel like consumers know what they do.
Wow.
How can a designer explain their expertise without sounding like I think a lot of people think that designers are trying to oversell product. They can make money on product, so that's the tricky part because they're recommending and making money. Very similarly to any other business, by the way. Like, you don't go to your mechanic and he doesn't tell you what's wrong and also makes money on the parts. But for some reason, because we're women, that becomes an issue. How do you feel like they should tackle that and delivering the list of services? Like, how do they explain that value that they can, bring to the table?
It's always about knowing what your audience cares about, what is relevant for them, and using their language, because too often what I see a lot, especially in proposals, but it's also conversations where I think it's just a nature of the beast that most of us as humans, we want to prove our value. So we tend to talk about ourselves a lot, and we think we have to say like, oh, I have this and I have that, as opposed to, Lori, tell me more about the vision that you have for your home. And I mean, of course, I'm sure that would be a standard question anyway,
Yes, right.
But getting more into their heads, frankly, about what matters to them. And then also a big question, again, this is a lot that I've learned from sales, is really asking that permission almost of, well, it's more asking the question of, how motivated are you to do this project? How committed are you? And tell me more about, like, basically, we're getting to determining whether they have decided or they're deciding.
Right.
So am I just kind of kicking around the tires and thinking about this? And so being clear about that first is going to also then connect to how you're communicating your value, because then you could look at, you can speak to the things that matter to them, and then also speak to the things that maybe they haven't even thought of. Like, how can you surprise and delight your clients or potential clients.
I love that. I love that phrase. I love that phrase, surprise and delight. I think it's so true. We often get so stuck in the weeds and we forget about the customer service aspect of design.
Exactly.
There is such an emotional burden in design. You have no idea because it's so emotional for the client going through that process, whether it be a home that they're living in or they've moved out or they've saved and they've got this dream home that they're building. Sometimes it comes at crucial times in their lives. There are often times like something has happened, like the kids have moved out or they just bought a new place that they're doing a new chapter and they're retiring and they're going to their dream retirement location or there's always been sometimes there's a life thing that's happening around there that's already stressful.
Right.
So it is so tied to that. So when presenting, I just think of like them presenting a design concept, and they're showing the first renderings and they're so excited. And, how do we prevent that from clouding their judgment when it comes to the financial aspect? Do you teach that in your courses? You've talked about phrases. Like, what are some of those top phrases people use?
Yeah, I have. Well, there's a number of them, I think, related to negotiation, for example. So one, if we're talking about, again, the number one thing is making sure that you're asking multiple questions and even simply
and different
the prompt.
ways.
Yeah. Like for
okay.
example, I love the phrase just simply curious. Just leading with that. Now, you don't want to overuse anything either. And another one to me, another phrase I love is help me understand. And then when we think about, because there's a lot of different directions that this could go in this moment, Lori, because so much of it also depends. But I'd say the biggest thing to be careful of is remembering to be others focused versus self-focused. Because to your point, we can get really excited. And I've also seen people give way too much detail and information.
That's me.
So I hear you. I always tell people I'm a recovering rambler myself. So remembering even the power of the pause, just stopping. And it's the same thing I teach in conversations that might potentially be the courageous ones or where there's potential conflict, where usually when we're either excited or nervous. So I think about, somebody who might be a designer that it has a whole pitch ready and very excited about presenting that. And then also somebody who maybe has a potential conflict with somebody and they're nervous. Both cases can end up being a monologue. So we have to remember to say a little bit and then stop and say something like, how is that landing with you so far?
Right.
Or another phrase I love is, how is this resonating? Or what's coming out for you in this moment? Or what's exciting as you're listening to this? What's exciting for you? And open-ended questions like that then can help inform, okay, I thought I was going to go over here and talk about, all the things that I could do in their living room, but what they really care about is their rec room. So let's focus more on that.
Right.
So it's being prepared, but then also goes back to that flexibility and resiliency to know, okay, let's listen here. And then even asking, sometimes I find myself in conversations where I'm not sure, like, where do I want to go next? And then take the pressure off yourself and just ask, Lori, where would you like to go next in this conversation?
Right. Right.
Where would you like to go from here?
Yeah. And I think being open to it diverging in different ways. And also one of the things that when you were speaking that I was struck with, and I think this is something that has happened to you, and therefore I can see it being so valuable to our designers. Oftentimes they somewhat neglect marketing. It's just not in their forte. They don't love it. And so they don't really market. So when a potential client comes in, when that somebody's emailed them or they've DM'd them, they're so excited about the project. They maybe have looked at the property. It looks great. It's aligning with them. They want it too bad. And they aren't used to practicing and getting the emotion out of the way. I remember talking to a designer who was like, I've given them the proposal and they haven't called back yet. He probably went with someone else. And I was like, I wouldn't think that yet. It's literally been 3 days. So
Yes.
I would not be in a world where I would think that they are not going to come back with your proposal or have made some weird decision. It could be even 2 weeks, like you can do a follow-up. You can have a process for that where you are following up and where the deal can, how people are coming into your world or leaving and, navigate the project or leaving your world, to manage those expectations and manage that process so everyone loves you, whether they hire you as an interior designer or don't. I want them to make that experience when they come into an interior design community so warm and lovely that they're going to tell 10 people how great I am. So, that is what the focus should be. And then the practice of those conversations make you better at them, right? Isn't that what you're saying? I mean, that's what I'm getting, is that you didn't get to this point immediately. This took practice.
Right. This is my entire, like that is really important, that it's my entire life's craft over the past 25 years. I've always been fascinated with language, but then starting in my communication journey with different, corporate clients, and that's really what I've been studying, is how to help people communicate with influence through their delivery and their content. I mean, that is everything that I've been doing. So the beautiful thing is that it is a skill. You don't just come out of the womb this way, just like professional athletes or any craft, like interior design or, what expertise. And remembering that these are skills that can be learned, but it also, everybody, no matter what you want to do, we have to have a compelling reason to do it. Nobody is going to do anything unless there's a compelling enough reason where they're feeling enough of a need to change. And this is what I see a lot that is a challenge, because sometimes I see, and I actually shouldn't say sometimes, this is a lot of what I see, are incredibly brilliant people. And again, I keep coming back, particularly women, that are misrepresenting themselves simply in their presence or in how they're coming across with their language. And I don't mean dialect. I mean, like, what are you actually saying? And this is where I don't see as enough people taking this seriously to say, I'm going to invest in this so that I can get better, commanding attention, being certain in the things that I'm saying, having all of these phrases at the ready, and taking time to record myself, have conversations in role play, see how these things come across, or at minimum, recording your own conversations in meetings where you have the ability to do that. And of course, there's permission.
And listening, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine that. That scares me and also excites me so much, because I wonder if they played that back, they could hear the apologizing. They could hear
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I have a whole talk called 7 Ways Women Give Away Their Power and How to Take It Back. And one of the ways is the minimizing language that we use. So words like, I think maybe if we considered, versus this is the recommendation that I have moving forward. Or here's what I recommend. It's such a different feel. But so many of us, I recently read a stat that's 49% of adults, general, not just women, 49% identify as people pleasers. And when we think about how many of us are walking around trying to make everybody happy by saying the right thing or not offending or whatever it might be, remembering that most of us could stand to take a few more risks. And if all we did, like for anybody that's listening, at minimum, record yourself on your phone when you're in a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, whatever it might be, and just listen to your voice. Do you sound credible? Are you speaking with conviction? Are you also friendly in the way you come across? Any of us can relate to this when you think about calling, a customer service place, like whatever it might be, the airlines or a cell phone company, the cable company. As soon as a rep answers the phone, is this person taking me somewhere? Do I trust this person? Just by the tone of voice. And if we have just a little awareness of how our voice sounds, even better, seeing our presence on video, all of that is absolute gold. But most people don't think it's that big of a deal. But I was recently at an event and there were 8 panelists. One stood out significantly because she took the mic. From the moment she took the mic She commanded authority with her voice. She also had a great smile. She also had very, what I call flagging statements, where you say something before it's coming. So for example, here are the 3 things you founders need to know about how to invest in or how to fundraise, I think she said. But she would always say, here are the 2 things. Listen up. I'm going to share 2 things with you. And it was so good. And I thought, there are 8 brilliant women on this panel, or the different 2 panels, but it was the one that really stood out. I want every one of them to stand out.
Right. I feel that, because I think that designers are in that boat with very repetitive issues. I will tell you one scenario that comes up probably more than the rest, and that is the furniture piece. So they have contracted the designer. The designer is selling products that they have spent time going to trade shows to find, building relationships with the brands, establishing a trade relationship, because usually there's a minimum that's extremely high, by the way, like $20,000 or something like that to invest in to get that trade account. And then they say these are the things, they've already been paid for the design process, but their whole profit margin is built on the designer, the client buying in on the furniture and the design. And so they'll send over, like, this is the invoice for the 2 chairs. And that client will immediately go online, reverse image search it, and see if they can find it cheaper online. And sometimes they can, sometimes they can't, but sometimes they can. And immediately come back and say it's $20 cheaper, it's $200 cheaper, whatever, on this website. Can we just buy it through there? And that's always the hardest conversation for them, because the answer to them is no. I immediately lose the part of the profit that I counted on from this project to have design fee and furniture. I can't help it that there are a bazillion retailers. I don't know the quality of that retailer, whether that retailer got it as a second, which happens in our industry, whether or not it's going to be delivered on time, how it's managed. A lot of the product comes into a designer's receiver where it sits until it's installed. And so there's a whole process, and having someone take a piece out of that process is really time consuming for a designer, believe it or not, even if they get no money from it. So those kinds of scenarios happen. That's probably the number one scenario that designers are combating on a daily basis, is what we call being shopped. Like somebody can find one component cheaper online from somewhere, and then having to justify that, and that's hard. And what do you say about those kinds of conversations? How do you have that?
Well, it goes back in my mind first to deciding what you're available. I almost think about it as, what am I available for? What am I not? Am I available for allowing my client to do that, or saying, like, just letting it go? I think it always goes back to what is going to be the better, how should I say this, the better choice, because is it worth it for me to have the relationship and get the rest of the business and give them a small win of, I got a better deal? But then I think the biggest thing, if you wanted to have the conversation, then I would say that could actually be something that I would recommend doing proactively, to say, hey, and this is a person that typically it's once you've started working with the client. Yeah. So saying, here are some parameters, just so we're both in agreement about the way that I work. This is my process, and let's talk about it. So it's basically managing expectations from the get-go. And one of the things could be to actually say that out loud. A lot of times, and in fact, this is a very common thing that happens, and I get it. I want to save money too, that you might be tempted to go look at online and see if you get a better deal, like just acknowledging that this happens.
Yes.
And then saying, so here's the reason why I have my prices the way I do, whatever logic the person might want to say.
Well, I think, just so you know, like I've experienced in this area, the logic to me is that if they literally spent the hours it would take to go online, every sale of every item, to make sure where the lowest one, that they were lower than something that was available online, of which there are literally millions of SKUs, they would be spending more time navigating the internet, and the bill would be higher anyway. So that is really, if I spend 7 more hours looking for the cheapest price on a lamp,
why are you paying for the person to do all this.
Why would you pay me to do that? But
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to come out a little ahead and sometimes you're going to come out a little behind. But overall, we try to be fair. Retail price.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
it.
I think what you just said there is a perfect example of that. Of, hey, I want to have an open dialogue with you about this because I know a lot of people tend to do this. And here's in the end how it will be beneficial. And, be upfront, obviously, to say, there might be a time where you may get a better deal. But if you're spending hours looking for that, then it kind of defeats our whole point here. And, something to the tune of that. I think.
Yeah.
More than anything, rather than the specific language of what to say, my biggest advice here would be simply to have the conversation and to have it proactively. So then you don't have to backtrack, and that can be more awkward and uncomfortable.
With confident boundaries.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I love that that's what your whole mission is, those confident boundaries where you've already made an agreement with yourself.
Yes.
About what that parameter, those guardrails are.
Exactly.
And you're not really letting people go beyond them.
Yes.
I love that.
And trusting that, again, better is on its way and that you're going to trust yourself knowing I can create something else. Opportunities come to me.
I love it. We have usually some lightning round at the end that I just think are fun questions. What's one sentence every woman should practice saying without apology?
That doesn't work for me.
Ooh, I love that.
Or I'm not available for that.
I love that. What are you still afraid to ask for?
That is a tough one, Lori.
I know.
It is. Probably things related to where I know it might inconvenience someone or disappoint someone.
Yeah, I think we all love to make people comfortable, and it's a really hard habit to break.
Yeah.
What's one word you wish women would stop using in meetings?
Sorry.
Yes.
Here's my tip for that. When you start noticing yourself, I'm sorry, and it's starting to come out of your mouth, say first, if it's appropriate out loud, but if not, say it inside, I'm sexy. So I always tell people, be sexy, not sorry.
I like that. That's
But
fun.
then obviously in a real scenario, thank you for your patience. I appreciate you waiting, things like that, instead of the immediate response of, I'm sorry. I've trained myself to say, excuse me, as my knee-jerk reaction now. So when we can just train ourselves to at least start with excuse me, then the thank you for your patience, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is your go-to phrase when you need a moment to think?
Let me take a moment. But even before that, I would say pausing for 1 to 2 seconds is actually just as effective.
Yeah. That silence thing, right? I mean, giving the room a minute to breathe. And even if it's awkward for them, it's fine. It's fine at the end of the day.
It doesn't, usually it's not, and that's the thing, is it feels awkward when we're doing it, but to the audience, it usually doesn't. And especially if we've incorporated pauses throughout our conversation or presentation, then it won't be weird.
Yeah. What's one habit that instantly makes someone feel less credible or sound less credible?
Does that make sense? Things like that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I think maybe we should consider.
Yeah.
Like, I think, I maybe, kinda. Those are words that often creep in, or things like, you know what I mean? It's just wasted filler words.
Do you think that, I'm just curious that this is one of the questions, but I think that in today's age, it's really interesting. If you had to have a difficult conversation, phone call, email, face-to-face, which is better? But I also think we live in a world where sometimes you just can't be face-to-face. It's really hard to have those conversations. It's sometimes those conversations are going to happen on email or Zoom or a phone call because we live in 2026 where we're not doing business with people that are further away. But what would you do you'd rather have conversation? Would it be phone call, email, face-to-face, Zoom? Where would you
number one, certainly face-to-face, and then secondarily virtual with cameras on. Yeah. And then for sure, then phone would be after that, email last. It also depends on what the point is. And too often I would say that people, because it feels safer, navigate or default to email, especially when they're feeling wronged or there's some potential. Again, I always say it's the potential of a difficult conversation. It doesn't mean it has to be difficult, but it's how we perceive it. And then just remember, usually things get a lot worse when we start texting or emailing because tone can be so easily misread. And if, for example, you can't reach the person and you really feel like you need to say something, this is also for a positive experience too, is leave a voice memo, or like LinkedIn. I leave voice memos all the time on LinkedIn, and people can hear your voice, and I find that to be very effective. But it's also,
Wow. I never even thought of voice memos on LinkedIn. Wow.
yeah,
Interesting.
you can only do it on your phone though, so I don't want
Yeah.
to misinform.
No, that's
But
great.
even sending a quick video. But that's the other thing. If you're going to do a video or a voice memo, make sure it's short and sweet.
Yeah. 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 The last one, what's the best advice you've ever received about speaking up?
Just to say what you want to say.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Karen. This has been
You're
so
welcome.
fantastic. I can't
Thank
wait for
you.
our audience to meet you and see what you're about, because we're going to make a big whole thing about you. You're going to be on all of our socials and all of our blog and link to you, so that I hope more
Thank
people
you.
find you and can learn how to navigate those difficult conversations.
Thank you so much, Lori.
This episode is brought to you by Curry & Company. Designers, you know the moment. You walk into the room and the lighting stops you in your tracks. Chances are it might be Curry. Curry & Company has built its reputation on pieces that feel sculptural, collected, and timeless, from hand-finished chandeliers to statement lamps, furniture, and accessories. Their collection is top-notch. If you haven't explored their newest introductions, take a look. Visit curryandcompany.com,